mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic.
Hey everybody, welcome back to One Mic, where I watch shit so you don't have to. And today I'm here to talk about Season 5, Episodes 1 and 2 of FX's Snowfall, entitled Comet and Commitment, respectively. These two episodes were kind of used to, I guess, kind of like set the stage for what we're going to see for the rest of the season. These episodes have like not a huge progression in the storyline, so to speak. It's more of a like, we're going to set the pieces for the storyline and then we're going to lead you into it. Kind of dealing with the fallout of the events that happened at the end of Season 4 and setting up and transitioning into the story that they want to do for Season 5. So I'm going to start just by saying I'm fighting off a cold, so if I seem a little congested, that's why. So if I'm sniffling or anything like that, just know that's why. Don't give me shit about it. I'm trying to just come on here and make sure that I still get this content out regardless, and I want to do it while I'm still feeling pretty good. You know, I was kind of getting past it yesterday. I feel a little bit better today, which is good because I got a lot of fucking videos to put out today. But I just want to let you guys know ahead of time that's what's going on here. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how the pieces are being positioned for this upcoming season. We meet some new characters. We kind of reestablish where our current characters that we already know what they're up to, and we kind of set the stage for, well, I'll get to it in my thoughts. I already have some guesses and predictions about where this season is going, because Season 4 started off it was very clear from the beginning of Season 4 that Scully and Man-Boy were going to be like your main antagonist. Right now, in Season 5, that's not clear yet, but I think I have an idea where this is going. But before I get to that, I'm going to start with, updating on these characters. So, like I said, they use these first two episodes to kind of, not just kind of set up Season 5, but also to kind of do a reset, right? Because at the end of Season 4, they spent that time tearing Teddy down. You know, he gets kicked out of the CIA, and he ends up essentially going rogue. And I was wondering, if you watch, I have all of Season 4 covered on this channel. I was wondering if Teddy killed just Alton, or if he killed Alton and Sissy, because that seemed kind of weird to kill Alton alone and then just leave. Even though Alton was the primary threat, it made me wonder if Sissy was still alive, if Sissy was alive or not. And I thought that was something we would find out at the beginning of this season, which I'll talk about that in a moment. But Season 4 kind of pulled Teddy out of the main storyline, separated him, and then removed him altogether for the most part. These two episodes serve to reposition Teddy kind of right back where he was. It's like a hard reset for him. We spend, at least with Teddy, these two episodes watching him kind of reposition himself by both tearing down his replacement, Grady, and also kind of showing how he can be an asset back in LA once again. He even mentions, like, you know, everything's kind of died down. It's been a year. Nobody's checking in to me. So Teddy uses this time, well, not Teddy, but the writers use this time to kind of reset everything and put Teddy back in line with Franklin. So this kind of gives me a good transition to talking about some of the new characters we meet. Grady is one that we meet. He's Teddy's replacement after being kicked out of the CIA. There's a scene at the end of Season 4 where Teddy's telling Gustavo, like, you know, in a few days they'll send in a replacement for me, yada, yada, yada. That ends up being this guy, Grady. It ultimately doesn't matter because by the end of Episode 2, Grady's dead and Teddy's back in. But we find out that Grady is, having sex with one of Franklin's workers. I don't know, henchmen. I don't know. I believe that was the two girls who were hunting for Leon, and then Franklin offered them a job instead as kind of like his like bodyguards or some shit. Grady's messing with one of them. He's skimming money. I think Teddy said something around 7 figures worth of money. And then he's messy because he shouldn't be doing legitimate real estate business with Franklin. Those two things should be separate, according to Teddy. I don't know. I'm not a fucking drug dealer, but like that's what Teddy says is the case. They shouldn't be essentially mixing business with pleasure, because even though this is all business, from Teddy's perspective and from the CIA's perspective, the drug shit is business. Going legitimate on the real estate is pleasure. Like that's what they're doing on their own. And Teddy's saying those two things shouldn't be mixing together. It's too risky. So that's what we end up with Grady at the end of the episode. At the end of the second episode, Teddy seems to have poisoned Grady's drink, or maybe like put some poison on the rim of his glass, something like that. He's getting ready for bed. He passes out. The scene prior to that with them, where Teddy kind of reads. I'm sorry, not Teddy. Grady kind of reads Teddy. It was actually pretty good. Like, Teddy says, I'm not doing this because you insulted me, but Grady was so wildly accurate with his assessment of Teddy that it had to have stung a little bit. So I'm sure there was a little bit of vengefulness in there as well. So we also meet Veronique, which is Franklin's new girl. She's running the real estate side of things for him, and we find out at the end of episode 1 that she's pregnant. Pretty big deal. As is always the case in these kinds of shows, these villainous protagonists, they get this new outlook on life when they have a kid on the way. So we'll see how that affects Franklin, but I have some guesses on that too, and I'll save it for like my thoughts at the end of the video. So we also meet this guy, Bo. He's a crooked cop, black guy, mustache, small fro. He got a bad tip from a CI that prompted him to raid what he thought was a crack house, and it was just a family was living there. Looks like they roughed up one of the kids. He's like wild rude to the mom. And then later, we find out that he's actually kind of like Jerome and Louie's, I guess, cop on the inside. And he like feeds them information. He gave Louie an update that the police weren't looking for this Thad guy, who I'll talk about Thad in a little bit. And he also tells Louie that he needs her to provide him with essentially a fall guy just to kind of keep his superiors off his back. That happened, I would say, 3/4 of the way through the first episode. And after the first 2, that whoever this fall guy is hasn't happened yet. My wife and I assumed it would be White Boy Rob, but, well, I'll just send this into the White Boy Rob and Thad portion. So White Boy Rob is doing his thing. He's got this guy Thad, and they're at this party. They're doing coke, and some douchey guy walks up and just does a line of coke off the table and sits down and makes himself comfortable. And Thad, I mean, rightfully so, right? Kind of checks this guy like, who the fuck are you? Like, you just gonna come up and use our coke and just help yourself? He's like, well, this is my boy's place, and I don't even know y'all, so let's keep it cool. But like, even then, like, if I'm at my homeboy's place, right, I'm gonna feel a certain amount of authority because this is my homeboy's place. Y'all are all guests. Like, that's my brother. Like, y'all are all guests. But at the same time, I'm not gonna walk up to somebody's table and just use their cocaine without even asking. And then the dude had the nerve to be a smart mouth, try to be super cool and douchey. I'm not saying he deserved to get shot, but I understand. So essentially, Thad runs off and he hides out in Palm Springs. Eventually, he contacts White Boy Rob, who's using heavy. So Franklin kind of looks at both of them as a liability. And there's a moment when they go out to Palm Springs to go. Well, I'm assuming Franklin went out there to kill him, regardless of anything that happened. But there's a moment where Thad says, like, what's the plan? And then he says something like, maybe your CIA guy can help get me some new identification or something to that effect. He mentions Teddy. And that, to me, and I think to Franklin, because Franklin made a face, is an indicator that White Boy Rob, when he's getting high, gives up too much information. So him being high is a liability as well, which is why I believe Franklin also ended up killing White Boy Rob. And it wasn't just like, oh, he's back on. He's, that's part of it. Like, you don't want to, don't get high on your own supply, right? But that's bad for business. But I think also is the fact that Franklin now has reason to believe, because that little line about your CIA guy, because that's something that Thad shouldn't even know about. That kind of clued Franklin in that White Boy Rob talks too damn much when he's high, and he doesn't want any heat coming down on them, so he kills both of those guys at the end of episode 1. So that's kind of where I think we stand with our new characters. Most of them are dead anyway, but I'm curious where this Bo guy, what's going to happen with him. I think he's going to be a primary antagonist this year as well. There was the one cop who was old girl's father. I can't remember her name or his name, but, somebody like that, like, a cop guy who's, although this guy's not a good guy. The cop guy who was old girl's, what's her name, Melanie? Her father was actually a good guy. This guy's not. But I could see him being another cop problem. So back to kind of, finding out where the characters that we know are at. Wanda's working as like a sex line operator. She's not that good at the job, and the dudes are busting too fast. She finds out that her check is short because her boss has to essentially skim more money off the top to prepare for potential fines. She has a fit, knocks his coke off the table. She's lucky he let her leave. That's a big waste of money. And then she quits and leaves. Then she goes to Leon to essentially ask for a job back in the drug game. And Leon, being the guy that he is and how he always looks out for Wanda, is like, no, we're not doing that. So that's where we last leave Wanda. Like I mentioned, Leon, he's back working in the neighborhoods, just how he has been for, I think, the past couple seasons at this point. He doesn't have any interest in any of this real estate shit. He breaks this guy's feet who stole some Jordans, which I think is... I like... When I'm watching this show, I kind of like to see if the things that are happening, like, in the background are in line with the time period. So, at the beginning of episode 1, we find out it's 1986. When Leon breaks dude's feet, they pull back so we can see the shoes, and it's some Jordan 1s. And I looked, and the Jordan 1s came out between 85 and 86. So it tracks that in 1986, Jordan 1s were like the hot shoe. So I thought that was kind of cool. Jerome and Louie are still working for Franklin. They're trying to bring the prices down to stay competitive. Jerome buys a couple of horses. They seem really happy. Louie's very, I guess, grateful for Jerome. She's said something like he's a king among men or something like that. I feel like this is going to go bad, but I also can't, it's hard for me to say something's going to go bad between them when they flirted with killing Louie last season. And I think killing off Jerome is something that could potentially happen, especially because Louie's already in the first episode building him up. So, that usually happens to tear somebody down. So I'm a little worried for Jerome. Peaches, I wouldn't have mentioned Peaches if it wasn't for the fact that they really leaned into him having a cold. The first time we see him, he sniffles, which that obviously that hell for me because I'm sniffling while I'm watching this shit. But he's sniffling. He's like, oh, these summer colds are the worst. And I feel like every time we see Peaches after that, he looks worse. And they don't mention the cold at all anymore, but it's just him looking like shit. Like he's just going through it. And it makes me wonder, is something wrong with Peaches that's worse than a cold? Is he sick with something that might be killing him? And you got to think, what else were we seeing? What all was going on in the 80s, right? You had the crack epidemic. We have the death of Len Bias, which I'm going to talk about toward the end. And then we also had HIV popping up. And I'm not saying Peaches got HIV. I'm just saying they are... You wouldn't even write a character having a cold into a show or a movie. Why would you write that? Just like, yeah, he just happens to have a cold. No, they have a cold for a reason. Like, so it's gonna play into the show or into the storyline for some reason. Because why would you give him a cold? That's a random thing to do, right? And like I said, they don't mention it anymore. But every time we see Peaches, he looks worse. And I'm wondering if Peaches got HIV. Or maybe not even necessarily HIV, but something that is worse than just a cold. So again, that's my it's my first prediction that I've stated so far, but I have a couple more. Oh, wait, no, I said the thing about Jerome possibly being taken out as well. Let's see. So where am I? Teddy, like I mentioned at the top of the video, he's worked his way back in. He's right back where he was, where he's been for most of the series. Franklin is again not trusting him. He's still calling him Reed because he doesn't know the whole thing. But Teddy tells him, you can call him Teddy. Franklin had a gun in his humidor that he was thinking about using on Teddy if things got out of hand. But Teddy also does not agree to the price drop that Grady agreed to. So I'm gonna say this now. I feel like Teddy is one of the people who is going to be built up as the primary antagonist of this season. He's already kind of, shoehorned his way back into Franklin's life. He's not adjusting the prices. And then there's a couple other things that I think he might be up to as well. So lastly, Franklin, he's big in the real estate now. He apparently has a pilot's license. I don't know where that came from. And like I mentioned, Veronique is pregnant. He wants to build this compound. He has this land that he's looking at. He wants everybody to invest in it. he asked Jerome and Louis to invest, and they're kind of like 10 million. Like, that's pretty much all we got. They ain't gonna get it back for like 3 months. But I mean, passive income is always a win if you can get it. So it seems like a good deal. Leon's not interested. I'm wondering if Franklin is somehow gonna, I don't want to say end up robbing Jerome and Louis, because that feels purposeful. But I'm wondering if somehow he's gonna get the 10 mil from them, invest it into this compound that he wants to, build, and something's gonna go wrong with that, and they're gonna lose that money. Because he says at the beginning, nothing tears a family apart like money. You get them to invest 10 million in your project, and your project don't work out, and they lose $10 million. You might have to die. Like, again, I'm not saying they should kill him, but I understand. So I'm gonna wrap up with a couple of thoughts on these 2 episodes. They're gonna tie together some of the things that I mentioned throughout the course of the video. Franklin clearly doesn't know about his father yet, and there's a moment in episode 1 where he says, I think White Boy Rob asked him about his mom. He's like, yeah, I talked to her a couple times. She's cool. And I'm thinking, like, you talked to your mother and she didn't tell you that your father was dead? And then in episode 2, he calls and there's a whole lot of static. And I could see some words on the screen because I watch with subtitles, but just listening, you're not going to hear anything Sissy is saying. And she doesn't respond to too much. He says, I think there's a moment where I caught the caption saying something like, it's good to hear you. And then when he says she's pregnant, there's nothing. But then he says, we're having a baby. And she goes, oh, a baby, I'm excited. Something to that effect. But you can't hear any of this. And before the call connected, Franklin asked to be he asked to be connected because calling directly wasn't working. And I'm wondering if the reason he clearly doesn't know about his father and why his mother wouldn't have told him about his father is if they're both dead, and the person that he thinks is his mother is someone else, and Teddy fucked up the quality of the call. He makes it so that connection is messed up, so that Franklin won't know it's not his mother he's talking to. So that's my big prediction right now, is that they're both dead, and Teddy is covering it up with this bad phone connection, so that he won't know that that's not his mother he's talking to, and the person he's talking to is just somebody else. So that's what I think is happening there. Franklin's girl, like I mentioned already a couple of times, Franklin's girl is pregnant. I don't see any way both her and that baby survive this season. When you have a protagonist like Franklin, who's a bad guy for all intents and purposes, they usually hit those characters with more and more tragedy to push them more and more into being a bad guy. And I feel like if you're thinking that Franklin's gonna live a fucking happy ass life in suburbia with Veronique and a kid and legitimate real estate, I don't know what, this must be the first show you've ever watched, or you were born yesterday. There's no way that's gonna happen. So I think more than likely that kid and Veronique probably aren't gonna make it out of this season. And then I also want to note that this season I think is really gonna miss Scully and Manboy if the primary antagonist is gonna be Teddy, and maybe to a lesser extent this dirty cop Bo. I'm not saying that Bo or Teddy can't live up to what Scully and Manboy were up to, because they're working on a much larger scale anyway. But there was just something about Scully and Manboy that I feel like they're going to be missed as the primary antagonist this year. And then lastly, I'm only 18 minutes in. I thought I was farther in. Lastly, I want to talk about Lynn Bias, because I'm wondering why this was so heavily mentioned in episode 1, and why Lynn Bias's death in Maryland would have such a huge impact on LA. So for those of you who may not be aware, this is not a fictional story. This is not something made up for the show. Lynn Bias was a huge, huge star at Maryland, and prior to 1986, he was drafted number 2 overall by the Celtics. And mind you, in the mid 80s, the Celtics were incredible. Like, they already had they were already winning championships. So this championship team was bringing on the second pick of the draft onto a team that already had all of its pieces in place in a league that was looking at. They mentioned this in this opening scene. They mentioned Magic, they mentioned Jordan, and they mentioned Lynn Bias. So like, he was a big deal. 2 days after the draft, he died ODing on cocaine. So like, what we saw at the beginning of episode 1 was not a fictional, hey, some guy died and somehow this is having an impact on cocaine in Los Angeles. That shit really fucking happened. So I'm wondering, and they mentioned it several times, like Leon's watching a news story about Len Bias on TV. Franklin reads about it in the newspaper. So this wasn't like a one-off. And I'm curious how an NBA player ODing on cocaine is having an impact on LA. And it might not be anything too particular. It could just be the basic idea of the number 2 pick in the draft OD'd on cocaine. So now the government wants to crack down on cocaine even more, leading into the war on drugs, which I think which I don't even think that happens until the 90s. But regardless, I'm curious where the Len Bias thing is going. So to wrap up, like I said, we got our characters kind of in the places they need to be at. We got a hard reset on Teddy. I think Teddy and this Bo cop are going to be the primary antagonists, it seems. I'm wondering if Franklin's mother and father aren't already dead and Teddy's hiding it. So there's already a lot of stuff going on. I think these were a good couple of setup episodes. I like that they released the 2 of them on the same night because they both serve as kind of one episode to set up the season. So it looks like this is going to be another good season. I look forward to covering it. I will see you guys every Thursday morning with a new video talking about the previous night's episode of Snowfall. And until next Thursday, peace.